And what they did was they went to a university campus and they gave out money. Like, already that's a winning combination. But they gave a group of people $5. They gave another group of people $20. And they said to them, you can go and spend it on yourself, or you can spend it on other people. Now, they had a completely separate group of people who they told them what the experiment was going to be, and they said, what do you think will make these people happiest? And this group who was outside of it said, to be happier, people would spend more money on themselves. That was kind of their belief of how this experiment would play out. And I share that because we're doing this series on generosity. And we've been looking at what generosity is, what generosity looks like, where generosity comes from. Lani kicked off by looking at this idea of a lifestyle and a mindset of abundance, where God is the giver and God gives all good things, and we can either choose to live in that abundance mindset that he has, or we can live in this scarcity mindset where we keep and hoard and not be generous. And then Jared looked at how we are blessed to be a blessing, like Abraham was, that what God gives to us, he also wants to bless other people through us by what he's given. And then during Kids Church, we looked at generous hearts, where if you have a full heart that's full of God, is a generous heart that wants to share that with others. And last week, BJ kind of followed on from that theme by looking at the fact that we have been given this beautiful thing in this relationship with Jesus, and we're invited to share that with other people and be generous with what we've discovered and what we've experienced. Today, we're looking at the power of generosity. Now, Australians are a generous bunch. They did a global study on generosity, and in the World Giving Index, any idea where Australia ranks? Guesses? I'm going to give you a hint. Top 10? Third? Very close. Very close to fifth as well. Yeah, you guys are amazing. Yeah, Australia came fourth in amount of giving, where 55% of adults give their money, support, or time to others. And at this point, I think there is a huge need for generosity in our community. Financially, you hear it said everywhere, cost of living is hitting hard. There are people within our Burwood community here who are struggling to make mortgage repayments, who are struggling to get food on the table. There are people in our broader community who are living in cars because they can no longer live at home. There are people, I heard a story just yesterday of a family who have been living in their home for 19 years and they can no longer afford the mortgage repayment, so they're going to have to sell and move out. There are stories of people who are going without food so they can buy medicine. This is happening not just out there, this is happening in here as well. People are struggling, and for a lot of them, they have no way out apart from someone else's generosity. Mentally, we are bombarded with ads and messages designed to tell us what our lives should look like. Social media feeds tell us what other people are doing and that they're living their best life, and the natural thing we do is start comparing that with ours. And then thanks to algorithms and what Shoshana Zuboff, a researcher, calls surveillance capitalism, your feed starts showing you curated ads which just happen to fill that gap between where you are and what those people online are and where they are. And the average Australian is exposed to between 4,000 and 10,000 ads a day. You guys are above average, so you probably get more than that. But that is 4,000 to 10,000 times a day that you're being told what your life should be like, what you need, what you should have, what you should get, what you don't have. And as a result of that, it gets really noisy. in your head, in your ideals, in your beliefs, and that noise, basically, that noisy message is get, get, get. And it drowns out this call to give. Socially, we have this epidemic of loneliness where people don't need your money, they don't need your help, they need your attention and they need your time. And when there is also a lot of anger and hate and these things which people say online, in person, in the media, and I believe that we are desperate for an encouraging word, to hear a kind message, a kind response. And when we hear it, that sinks in deep, and it just kind of settles into this place in our souls where we feel, that is good. I need that. I need more of that. So I believe that the cultural moment that we live in is perfectly positioned for generosity. We're ready for this. And as followers of Jesus, there's good news because we have guidance on how to respond. As we've discovered, the Bible has a fair bit to say about generosity. If you go through, now the New American Standard Bible is probably the one of the more accurate translations of the original language. If you go through there and have a look at what the Bible says, it talks about praying a little bit, talks about believing a little bit, talks about love a little bit, talks about giving a fair bit. Jesus had a lot to say about giving. He had a lot to say about generosity. And some of these verses we've actually explored already, but I want to go through some of them again. It says, give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Or this verse, Luke 12. Don't be afraid, little flock. I love the way Jesus says that. If anyone else said that, it would be taken the wrong way. But when Jesus says it, it's endearing, it's meaningful. So don't be afraid, little flock. Your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, if this sounds countercultural now, it was also back then. To give was not the way that you went ahead in life. And then we have this verse in Acts 20. We don't have it recorded in the Gospels, but we have it recorded in Acts where they said that Jesus said this. And this is what it says. It is more blessed to give than to receive. And if you struggle with that, that's okay. Because we have this idea that, maybe it's not always comfortable to give. It isn't always your first response. It isn't the thing you constantly want to go back to and give and give and give. But in this word here, in the Greek, the word blessed there is a word called makarios. And makarios is a word that in the Greek context back in the day, it meant a blessed life. Kind of the hashtag blessed, probably use of it is probably pretty accurate, I'd say. Back then, this was actually a word that was used by the wider Greek culture, not the Christian culture, the wider Greek culture. And it was essentially a word that they used to describe the life of the gods. So it meant, makarios means I don't have to work. Makarios meant I don't have any cares. I don't have any worries. I don't have to worry about death. It's kind of what the gods experienced, how the Greeks view their gods. They were makarios ed. It's not a word, but you get the idea. They were blessed. And so it's essentially the good life. Makarios is the good life. No worries, no cares. You're looked after. You retire at 40. You've got plenty in the bank. You can do what you like. That was the context that this word came from. If you go back into the Old Testament, similar word for that is a word called ashrei. And this word also meant to be blessed in the Hebrew. But when you look at how it's used, we see these verses where it says, blessed is the one who walks with the wise. Blessed is he who is forgiven. Blessed is he who takes refuge in God. So the context of blessed here is, if you do these things, you will have a good life. If you are walking with the wise, life will go well. If you are forgiven, life is good. If you find your refuge in God, life is good. And this is the context that Jesus is borrowing from the Old Testament and now bringing into the Greek world and this New Testament context. And so what he does, he says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And we know that we've heard the word blessed before in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That doesn't sound right. It doesn't really connect. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. How does that work? How can you be blessed if you're crying, if you're feeling grief, if you're feeling loss? For they shall be comforted. Jesus takes this word, which for them meant the good life, and he switches up what the good life is actually about. For them, for the world, the good life is about receiving. But Jesus goes, hang on, no. We're going to flip the script on this. The good life is actually about giving. And in that context, this was pretty radical. This was pretty crazy thinking. And today, probably not so different. The good life is not about what you can get. The good life is actually about what you can give. And I think today we probably align more with the Greek view than Jesus' view, if you look at society as a whole. We want the good, carefree life where we don't have to worry about debt, it's all paid off. We don't have to worry about where the next bill is going to be paid from because there's plenty of cash in the bank. We don't have to worry about whether we're going to buy a house or we rent because we've got plenty, we can do what we like. We've got the investment properties, we've got the super. Things are smooth, things are easy, things are good. Focus is on achieving, essentially, comfort and security. And there's nothing wrong with that unless it prevents you from deepening your commitment to Jesus and his call towards generosity. But it can be real easy to be drawn into that Greek view of thinking. It can be so easy to get pulled into this idea that I need to focus on achieving the good life and the comfortable life and the secure life. And I think there's lots of reasons for that, but I want to share with you 2 reasons why we can so easily be drawn into that. Fear and forgiveness. Fear and forgetfulness, not forgiveness. I hope you'll forgive me. Fear that we can't give because we don't have enough. Fear that Jesus, when he said, do not worry about what you will eat or what you will drink or what you will wear. My Heavenly Father knows you need all those things. Instead, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness and all that stuff. I'll give it to you. Fear that Jesus didn't really mean that. Giving requires a trust that God is the God of abundance. That God is the one who said he will look after you, and when he says something, he'll actually do it. Sometimes we have a fear that he didn't really mean that he can't really come through on that promise. And so it seems easier and safer to seek this false contentment in culture of consumerism than to experience the good life that comes from giving. Fear and forgetfulness. Forgetfulness. Forgetting that this life is not all that we have. It can be easy to focus on achieving the good life and forget that the 80 years we have on this earth is not all that we have. Eternity actually begins now. When you think of life as these 80 years and that's it, that's a finite amount of time to achieve what you want. And if that's the only time you've got, you're going to focus your energy into making sure you get what you want done during that time. if you want to achieve that good, carefree life, then giving away is not going to get you there in 80 years. But when you remember that Jesus came in to usher in this kingdom that has no end, then giving comes more freely when you remember that this is just the beginning of an endless future of eternal provision. That God will give, and he will give, and he will give, and you will spend eternity, starting from this moment now, forever, experiencing the provision of God. So if fear and forgetfulness distract us from a life of giving, what's the antidote? Trust and reminders. Trust that indeed God actually is love. And if God is love, then, as J.I. Packer said, the measure of all love is giving. The measure of the love of God is the cross of Christ. If God is willing to give this much, can we trust that that love is going to extend to us as well? That his ability to provide is going to extend to you and me. Probably the most famous verse in the Bible. People know it whether they're Christians or not. For God so loved the world that he... Trust and reminders. We could benefit from being reminded that as followers of Jesus, we are living at the front end of eternity. How do you do that? I think we get reminded when we spend time in Scripture, when we spend time in prayer, when we spend time in meaningful, honest, and life-giving conversations with other followers of Jesus. We do that here, in our large gatherings, in our Sabbath schools, in our discussion groups, in our Burwood groups. This happens, and we do this because we want to be reminded that what we have now is not all that there is. This is just the beginning of eternity. So these provide for us reminders that the good life is not about getting, but it's about giving. Jesus showed that. He lived that. He calls us as followers to also follow his footsteps and do what he did. And that's what his followers have always tried to do, right from the first disciples. If you read through the early church writings, the leaders, Luke's account of the early church in Acts, I've just put a few on here. We have all these examples and these moments where they talk about the joy, the benefit, the blessing, the call to actually be generous and give what we have. They were committed to generosity. Justin Martyr was a Greek convert to Christianity. And this is around 100 AD. And this is kind of his autobiographical view of how it changed his life. He said, "We who once took most pleasure in accumulating wealth and property now share with everyone in need. We who hated and killed one another and would not associate with men of different tribes because of their different customs, now, since the coming of Christ, live familiarly with them and pray for our enemies." Talk about a change, a radical difference in how he focuses his life. To the early church, radical generosity was normal Christianity. They were simply following Jesus and doing what he did. F.F. Bruce, theologian, pastor, said this: "God bestows his blessings without discrimination. The followers of Jesus are children of God, and they should manifest the family likeness." I love that. They should manifest the family likeness by doing good to all, even to those who deserve the opposite. And so the early church would give, they would provide, they would care for, they would go without for those who needed it. And this was a powerful witness to those around them. One of the emperors, Julianus, or Flavius Claudius Julianus, if you're looking for a name for your child, he said this: "The godless Galileans," Christians, "feed not only their poor, but ours as well. Those who belong to us look in vain for the help that we should render them. These impious Galileans not only feed their own poor, but ours also, welcoming them into their agape. They attract them as children are attracted with cakes. Excellent analogy. Who doesn't love cake? But this generosity that the early church had as followers of Jesus was so beautiful, people wanted to come and experience it, like you want to experience cake. This is how attractive it was. Their generosity was a really powerful witness. The Emperor Julian, he then said to his pagan priests, he said, hey guys, I want you to do what they're doing. I want you to be generous to our people as well. I want you to give to them. I want you to look after them. It didn't work. They started, but it failed. And I think the reason why was because it wasn't coming from the same place where the Christians' giving was coming from. The Christian generosity would extend to going without so others could have. Have a look at this from Hermas, one of the leaders around 2nd century. Taste nothing but bread and water on the day you fast. Then estimate the cost of the food you would have eaten on that day and give that amount to a widow or orphan or someone in need. So I'm not sure what your view of fasting is, but I want to suggest that this takes it and doubles it. Because he's saying, hey, don't just fast, but what you would have eaten, give that to someone else who needs it. Making that maybe a little bit more relevant. Don't buy that new TV, but instead take the money you were going to spend on that new TV and give it to someone who needs it. Don't subscribe to that next subscription service that you're thinking of. Instead, take the money you would use to that and give it to someone who might need it. Aristides, another Christian apologist of the 2nd century, said something similar. When there is one among them, the Christians, needy or poor, and they do not have surplus resources, they fast for 2 or 3 days in order to supply to the poor their lack of food. Is that not challenging? If they see someone who's in need, they don't just go, oh, let's pray for them. They actually say, all right, I'm going to do something about this. And they choose to go without so that somebody else can have. That is next level generosity. The early church heard Jesus say, it's better to give than to receive. And instead of keeping it as hey, this is a really nice maxim, let's follow this, let's put it up on the wall, this is great. They went, no, we actually need to do that. We need to give because it's better than receiving. They gave out of love, and it was a powerful witness. It was a powerful witness of the love of Jesus. It was then, it was now, and it will always will be. Your generosity will always be a powerful witness of the love of Jesus. Scott Sauls put it this way: Christianity always flourishes most as a life-giving minority, not as a powerful majority. It is through subversive, countercultural acts of love, justice, and service for the common good that Christianity has always gained the most ground. It's not when it's in the majority. 4th century and Constantine showed us that didn't work. It's when it's in the minority, when it's showing other people what that looks like through personal, quiet, under the shelf, my left hand doesn't know what my right hand is doing kind of giving, that it grows, that it's impactful, that it's powerful. Earlier this year, I was privileged enough to go to the States for a few conferences, and while I was there, I got to meet a few different groups of people. And one of the guys I met kicked off this group on the left called Common Thread. And his story was that he actually used to be a church pastor, and he loved Jesus, and he wanted to follow Jesus, and he wanted to take the words of Jesus seriously. So He started spending time in his hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, in the places that were of a lower socioeconomic level to his. So they would go from their place in the suburbs into downtown, and they would hang out with people there. And they started developing relationships and friendships with these people. And the more time he spent there, the more he felt God saying, you're coming from your place of comfort into their place of need, and then you're going home again. I want you to be in their place of need with them. So their family actually moved into the downtown area, and they lived there, and they created spaces where nonprofits and mission-driven entrepreneurs can grow while meeting the needs of the residents in historically underserved communities. And so they set up these spaces. They've got this kind of basketball stadium where they have opportunity for kids in the area to come and play ball, to hang out, to have coaching. They've got a gym where young men can come in and work out their anxieties and their frustrations in a safe place. They've got a school where those who can't afford or can't get to school because it's not in their area can come to. They've got a place for the unemployed to learn building and construction skills. They have small businesses which provide employment and seed capital for startups and also provide housing for those who need it. And when I was talking to them and listening to them explain this, it wasn't so that they could have a cool legacy. It was so that they could actually just reveal the generosity of Jesus. That was their primary and only motivation for doing this. And as they did that, they saw this community grow, and people's lives started to slowly change and be impacted by what they were giving. God ended up calling them to a different area to kind of repeat this process with some other people. And the mayor of Birmingham caught up with him. They ran into each other, I think, at a car wash. And the mayor said, I heard you guys are leaving. Is that true? And Taylor McCall, he said, no, just our family. Common thread that's staying here. And the mayor replied and said, if all your community were to leave, we'd have to raise taxes to cover all the good you guys are doing in our city. What a cool picture of selfless generosity to a community. Another group in Florida resourced and equipped Christians to help other people in whatever context they found themselves in whatever area they were passionate about. And so these guys on your right, Underground, they have 162 groups of people who are giving their time and money and resources to help people in all kinds of ways. There's a group that helps vulnerable and exploited men, women, and children who have survived trafficking. They have a group who supports families in crisis and does emergency foster care. They have a group that create a fun and faith-filled space for the lost and abandoned teens in the community. They have a group who help restore women from the sex industry. They have a group that provides a community for men who are coming out of prison. All these different things are happening, and over 10,000 people have experienced the generosity of these different groups operating in downtown Tampa, in Florida. And as a result of that generosity, hard to estimate, but they think about 1,500 people have made a decision to follow Jesus. As a result of people giving of their time, their resources, their abilities, their skill, being generous with that into a community that responded. And we have stories in our community right here of people who have been generous, and as a result of that generosity, people have found Jesus. People have found community. People have discovered that, hey, I'm not alone in all of this. And that brings us back to where we started. In this moment of time, our world, our country, our city needs generosity. It's a powerful witness to the love of Jesus. And what's fascinating is even those who don't follow Jesus, who aren't Christians, see this need. The CEO of TED, Chris Anderson, he's written a book called Infectious Generosity. And he said this: whether our collective future is a good one or not depends largely on whether the majority of people give more to the world than they take from it. Now, this is a guy who has experienced generosity himself. And actually, he made the decision. TED Talks, when he came on board, they were a conference where people paid $800 to attend. He came on in June, I think 2005, or December 2005. June 2006, YouTube launched, and they went, what if we give these to everyone? What if we open up our TED Talks, put them online, anyone can access them, they're free. They did that, and as a result, who's watched a TED Talk online? Yeah. Who's been to a TED conference? Yeah. That generosity is something that he has seen is needed. And as Christians, if that's his view as Christians, our need for generosity is even greater because it's driven by the fact that God has been generous to us and he invites us to be generous to other people, to reveal the love of Jesus through that generosity. Our city needs to see Jesus through our generosity. Our community needs to see it through our generosity. And there's one thing to talk about this and sit and listen to a sermon and go, yeah, that felt good, yeah, that's true. But the rubber hits the road when you leave this place and you go, what am I going to do about this? How do I put this into practice? How do I make this a reality, not just something that made me feel good for 10 minutes and then I went home? As followers of Jesus, we're not just about hearing about the word, but doing it and living it out. So, I want to share with you 2 ways that you can do that this week. The first one is this. As a church, we want to establish a care fund for the people in our community who are struggling. And we have a number of them. And we want to do this by inviting you to take a screenshot of that. If you feel that God is giving you the opportunity and giving you the resources to be able to help somebody else, but you don't know how to do that, you don't know who to give it to or how that can work, then contribute some money to this, and the elders will be the ones who share it and who give it to those who are in need. It's a simple way to give. Maybe it's a bit hands-off, but it's a start. And it might be $2, it might be $20, it might be $2,000. That is between you and God. Take the steps that are small, that are doable. The other thing you can do is, each morning this week, kick off your day by saying this prayer. God, who can I reveal your generosity to today? And this might be through speaking generous words to or about someone in person or online. This might be about having generous thoughts. When you're confronted with critical assumptions or thoughts about someone, choose instead to think generous thoughts about them and find something positive to think about or to say. You may feel God prompting you to choose to have a generous wallet and help someone in need. It may be that God is saying, hey, I want you to be generous with your time. And choose a portion of your time that day or this week to spend with someone that you normally wouldn't spend time with. Or to spend with someone who God said, hey, I really want you to connect with this person. Maybe uncomfortable, may not know what to do, but if God's called you to do it, he's got a reason for that. Trust him. Take that step of faith and go and do what he's called you to do. I guarantee you that you can come back next week and say, it freaked me out, but it was the best thing I did all week. And you might decide to be generous with your home. Invite someone different over to your place. Share a meal. Share a coffee. And maybe if it's not your home, choose a cafe, Choose a place where you can be with somebody else and show them that they matter. Reveal the love of God to them through the generosity of your time. I want to come back to that first experiment. I didn't tell you what happened. They did the experiment, and at the end of it, they asked the people who had received the money who was happier. And the results were that the people who gave it away, regardless of whether it was $5 or $20, reported being happier than those who kept it. Now, you probably hear that and go, yeah, that makes sense. That's logical. Yeah, from a Christian point of view, it is. That's not why we give, to feel happy. It's just the way God's created generosity is that when we give it, there's this really cool thing he does where he lets you experience the joy that there is in giving. And I think that's just a glimpse of how God feels every day. When he sees the things that he gives you, the opportunities, the resources, the time, the experiences, he sees them and he sees your response and he goes, yeah, that was worth it. And so much more so. You know, I'm going to drop forward a bit to Jared's sermon next week, but so much more also when we think of Jesus and what God gave, and he says, yeah, it was worth it all. And we're going to sing our last song, Goodness of God. And it's that goodness that we experience every day. It's also that goodness that we get to pass on to other people and let that generosity reveal to them the goodness of God.